Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everybody. Haile Hoshe Madid to everybody from Mexico, Iran, and everywhere. Welcome to the presentation of this book, Los combatientes del Pueblo de Irán, de Moisés Garduño, The People's Combatants of Iran, History, Rise and Fall of an Islamo-Marxist Opposition. We have a very huge panel, excellent guests from Iran and UNAM here in Mexico City. And the presentation of this evening will be in English. So as we are so many, the guests, the professors will have 15 minutes for their interventions. And at the end, Moisés will give us a comment of his book. So in first place, I have the pleasure to welcome and introduce Professor Hamid Dabashi. He's a very dear friend of ours. He has been in Mexico many times and he's a mezcal lover as well already. Professor Hamid Dabashi is a Habo-Korbekian Professor of Iranian Studies in Comparative Literature at Columbia University. He received a dual PhD in Sociology of Culture and Islamic Studies from the University of Pennsylvania, followed by postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard University. Professor Dabashi has written more than 22 books, edited 4, and contributed chapters to many more. He's also the author of over 100 essays, articles, and books reviews on subjects regarding from Iranian studies, medieval and modern Islam, comparative literature, and world cinema. Among his largest publications, we have Revising the Colonial Gaze, Persian Travelers Abroad by Cambridge University Press, and Persophilia, Persian Culture on the Global Scene by Harvard University Press. Please, Dr. Dabashi, go ahead. We listen to you.
First of all, thank you for including me in this conversation. I'm delighted to see more than the book, actually my friends that are here. Moses knows that he's a dear friend, that I have known him for, I just forgot for how long. Musa and Ale are among my dearest, closest friends. I miss them dearly. I miss Mexico. Today I was walking with a couple of my Colombia colleagues, and I told them I should have gone to Mexico instead of the United States. I feel at home in Mexico. I feel my friends. Jaime, I dearly miss. We climbed, he and I, these magnificent monuments in suburb of Mexico City. Marcela, my dear friend Peyman in Canada that I haven't seen for a while. Distinguished intellectual historian whom I dearly love and miss. This COVID business has been a bizarre situation that we are mostly at home, reminiscing about people who are close to us and dear to us. Today we're here, of course, to celebrate the launch of Musa's wonderful work for a long time in production about the People's Mujahideen in Iran, the rise and fall of People's Mujahideen. Right now, at this moment, I have no affection for the People's Mujahideen. They are a treacherous organization to their own ideals and aspirations. But the fact that Musa has spent much of the last decade writing about them, in my opinion, today, his book in Spanish is the most comprehensive, the most recent, the most documented account that we have of Mujahideen, that as a result covers their promising rise in the 1960s in an entirely different historical circumstances, to which I hope my dear friend Peyman talks, because he is not just an extraordinary philosopher and historian of ideas. He is a personally, he and his family have been part of that revolutionary moment. He has a lot, he will have a lot to say as a participant observer about the period. I think that UNAM and El Colegio de Mexico, both of which I feel at home, are two extraordinary institutions of higher learning globally. And to me, that side of the border is the site of civilization in intellectual history, in art, in music, in cuisine, and yes, in mezcal that I dearly, dearly miss. We are here, as my dear friend Jaime, when I was there last time before the U.S. election, he said, "Yes, you have a choice between Pepsi and Coca-Cola." We chose Pepsi, I think. I mean, I didn't vote, but people chose Pepsi, and now this year they chose Coca-Cola. I have completely lost my trust in this thing called democracy. I believe people who live under tyranny are actually better off because they are not invested in their government. They don't have the illusion of democratic participation. And that, to me, is very liberating rather than this a spectacle that every 4 years we have to choose, as Jaime says, between a Pepsi Cola and Coca Cola and think, oh, wow, what a great democratic choices we have. Uh, uh, the new book of Musa is the product of a kind of knowledge production in Latin America, but especially in Mexico City, which is a cosmopolitan center. When I am in Mexico City, is not just that I am with my Mexican friend, but my friends from across Latin America. It is an extraordinary experience to be part of a moment and a space of knowledge production that is entirely different in its sentiments, in its political aspiration, in its humanism, in its attention to different cultures. Here, I just two sentences about Ali's extraordinary work, her own work, an interest in Persian literature and poetry, documentaries that she has made, travels that she has made. And recently, I was looking at some of my pictures that I have with Ale and with Musa and other friends, and thinking how much I miss them. I don't want to prolong. I just want to conclude by saying, when I look at the poster of Musa's new book, there is a history to the entirety of the production that extends from Mexico City to Tehran, his repeated travels and his scholarship. I actually met Musa for the first time in a conference in London, but I have been following his intellectual trajectory closely. And when I travel to Mexico City, I realize when I see him in the presence and company of his family, of his friends, of his former teachers, his current colleagues, that this book is not just the product of Musa's intellectual journey, but an entire intellectual trajectory of a country I deeply love and admire, I deeply miss. And on the occasion of this publication, I wish and I hope that there will be other occasions for my family and I to come back and visit. So, Musa, congratulations, all the best wishes, for many more successes, for many occasions for us to get together and celebrate your accomplishment. I was honored to have had the chance to write a short preface to your book. As you know, one of my latest books is dedicated to you and Ale, my dearest, dearest friends, and I wish you all the best.
Haile Mamnoon, Ustaz Dabashi, thank you very much, Professor, for these words. We must add to your comments that you wrote the preface to this book. It's a wonderful preface. And you mentioned in it that this book starts with a beautiful eulogy and ends as a sad compliment. So it gives us a good point for start this discussion this evening.
Right.
Thank you very much. Now we pass to hear our dear friend Marcela Álvarez Pérez. I will introduce her for you. Marcela Álvarez Pérez is professor of international relationships at Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. She received her master's degree in Asian and African Studies from El Colegio de México and a second master's degree in North American Studies from Universidad de las Américas Puebla, where she is currently studying her PhD in Creation and Theories of Culture. She is a member of the Pi Data Delta Honor Society of International Scholars, Beta Gamma Sigma, and of the Religionarism, Social Development and Borders Network. She has also worked on research projects on social media and youth political movements in the Middle East, as well as an Iranian domestic politics and foreign policy in the United States and Canada. One of her publications is Bordering on the Ridiculous Mex America and the New Regionalism by Alternatives Global, Local, and Political Journal. Welcome, Marcela. You have the microphone.
Thank you very much, Ale. I'm really happy to be here, and most of all, I'm honored to be with all of you, with Doctors Dabashi and Peyman, with Jaime, Moisés. There's always going to be good quality in everything that always like to talk a little bit about the book, but not enough so as to spoil it for everyone, because of course, what I want for everyone is to go and read it, right? So what can I say about the book? As Dr. Dabashi says, this has been the life work, in a sense, of Moisés. I know when he started working on this research, when he was working on his PhD, we have a lot of tales about his experiences in Iran. And when I was finally able to read it, I was really not surprised for the quality of his work, because I know him, but I was surprised about the depth of the knowledge of a group that is pretty much obscure when it comes to the scenery of the regional Middle East conflict. Usually we don't hear about the history of the Mujahideen Khalq. A lot of people don't even know about them. And Moisés managed to get this done and tell us the story from their genesis to their quote unquote demise. As we are going to see, he technically tells us in the end that they are not done yet, right? Now, the thing is, as I was saying, by its characteristics, by the relationships that they have made, it has remained an obscure group. It's not as glamorous, we could say, as the PLO, Hezbollah, or other groups that are fairly publicized also in the news. It's not just about the academia. So it is really interesting what he has done here. So, of course, we need to start talking about, or his book starts talking about the coup against Mossadegh and his government. We know that it was a turning point of the internal political and social dynamics that eventually would lead to the Iranian Revolution. And it is also very important to notice that we need to talk and remember about the great diversity of groups, associations, and ideologies that were behind the popular uprising. Now, we usually know about the religious populism because it's the ideology that prevailed, but we must not forget there was initial, we had other groups like modernist intellectual. This is something he starts to build up, the pragmatism of all the actors of the revolution, who, although they had diametrically different ideologies and objectives or goals, at the moment have a main one that was common, which was to overthrow the Shah. The thing is, after the revolution, the problems would come because then each group wanted their own ideals to prevail. Now, in this scenario is where we see the beginnings of the Mujahideen Khalq and creation of what from the outside could be seen as really contradictory or even mutually exclusive, because as Moisés points out, we could define them as an Islamo-Marxist identity, right? So once we see this, it sort of clashes with all the ideas that we previously had about two completely different ideologies or movements, we could say. Now, what we see then is how they also share similarity with other regional movements of the time. The idea of the importance of nationalism and anti-imperialism for the Middle East, and how even though there are differences, we can still find then certain things, certain ideals, certain goals that unify a lot of the groups that were active at the time and that are still some of them active today. Now, the second thing that I would like to point out is how after the revolution, we had political and social adjustments, right? The imposition of one group, Khomeini's, but with this imposition, the consequences over the other groups, and some of these conditions were further strengthened by the start of the Iran-Iraq war and the need to present a unified front common to foreign aggression. And now, again, we have the idea of this adaptation. I think this is a constant in the book, the idea of the adaptability of the Mujahideen Khalq to the context that they were living and the idea of survival. Now, so they adapt in this immediate war-like scenario, but eventually the original ideas that they had, they started clashing with this alliance that they did with Khomeini. So eventually we have a divorce of the Mujahideen Khalq and the Islamic Republic, as Moisés calls it, and this leads to the group once again completely restructuring in terms of its internal functioning, the political propaganda and platform that they had, but also as well as with respect to its financing. So we see a first complete change from the aggregation. Now, this eventually will lead to exile. They will lead to new rearticulation of interests, and eventually they will become allies of Saddam Hussein. And here I could not stop thinking about this phrase, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I think this is also another constant that we can see in the book, how sometimes things that would not have considered possible at the beginning of the idea of the group eventually start becoming the rule because they need to make all these changes in order to survive. So I think this is what I find most interesting, the idea of the constant evolution, adaptation, and change of the Mujahideen Khalq through their history, their relations and confrontations that they had with the Islamic Republic, but also with external actors like the United States and Europe, and how we can see in certain terms or in certain periods of time like a love-hate relationship, and the idea of how they are using their allies, but at the same time they are being used a lot of times. Now, we can see in the book their evolution towards the use of violence and later towards the idea of publicly rejecting it, the idea of the pragmatism that has always characterized them, leading them to a constant articulation and rearticulation of everything, objectives, discourses, alliances, and practices. And as Moisés well explains in this fabulous book, are full of contradictions and paradoxes. And I think this is the most important thing. Now, that in the end, and this is a little bit of what Moisés brings with the book, it makes us wonder if this idea of permanence, the idea of just being and surviving after so much reinvention and narrative changes, if it is worth it, if in the end you end up not recognizing yourself in the mirror. What happened to the group? What happened to the ideals that maybe they had at first, or the ideals that they are supposed to project to the outside, but the way in which they behave on the inside, right? So they end up being something completely different. And in the end, it seems as if they are not able to distinguish anymore if what really moves them are their own interests or those of the alliances that they are made to ensure their own survival. I think a very good word that Moisés uses to describe this at that point is opportunism. Now, I think that as Dr. Dabashi mentioned, because as he mentioned, there is not a lot of literature the subject matter, and the depths that Moisés has gone to, the presence in Iran, the research that is behind this group, it's what makes it really worth it to read. So I'm going to leave my participation up till now. As I said, I don't want to spoil the book anymore. I really want for you to read it, because it's really worth it. It's going to be, it's a long book, but you are not even going to notice. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcela. Thanks for remember that these books it starts with the Mossadegh movement, so it helps us to understand the modern history of Iran, not just the movement of the Mujahideen. Thank you very much. Now it's the turn of Dr. Bahad-Sadeh, that he has also been in Mexico at UNAM, and hopefully we will have him again soon. Let me introduce you, Dr. Peyman. Peyman Bahad-Sadeh is professor of sociology at University of Victoria and a faculty participant in the Cultural, Social, and Political Thought program of the same institution. He received his PhD in sociology from the Simon Fraser University and completed postdoctoral studies at the Department of Political Science at University of Victoria. He has taught sociology, political science, and humanities at Simon Fraser University, at University of Victoria, and at Brock University. He has written 6 scholarly books and several articles, essays, book chapters, and books of poetry, fictions, memoirs, and literature criticism in Persia. Among his publications, we have A Guerrilla Odyssey, Modernization, Secularism, Democracy, and Fedai Period of National Liberation in Iran, 1971-1979, by Syracuse University Press, and A Rebel's Journey, Mustafa Shoyan, and Revolutionary Theory in Iran by On World Academy. Thank you for being with us, Professor Peyman. Please go ahead.
Hello, my dear friends. I'm so thrilled to see you all, and I really miss you. Moises knows that, the day I arrived at Mexico City, I told him it was like I arrived at home. It felt so much like home, and UNAM felt like so much, my own university. And it's amazing the vibe that I get, and the intellectual resonance of ideas, the wonderful institution that you have, and the kind of bond and friendship that you have created there. And it's such a thrill to be amongst you. And thank you so much for inviting me for this momentous book. So before proceeding, I have to give a very heartfelt and deep congratulation to my friend Moises for this wonderful achievement. He has told me a couple of very impressive stories about the research that he put into this, and I think this is a really important book. It chronicles the period that because of the things that happened after 1979 and the whole generational shift. That's really an interesting aspect of Iranian reality today. That period has been sort of abandoned to history, and most historians who dealt with this period in the 1960s and 70s, the period that I call the era of national liberation in Iran, which of course starts with the coup against Mossadegh, right, and so on. What happened was we reduced, we means collectively the academics, we reduced that history to some kind of a chronicles of events. And there were so few works that really analytically looked at that period. And that was especially the 1960s, even, in my judgment, I could be wrong, but my judgment, more creative, more diverse. It was a fabulous decade, 1960s, right? In terms of all the contributions that Iranians did to the momentum for rethinking their situation in the post-coup era, right? And so I think this is a really important book. I I truly hope to see the English translation so that I wouldn't bump into my really like very, very poor Spanish, which is none. It's just it's an amalgamation of English, French, and Italian that I had studied, and it kind of makes sense of the book by looking at that and miss a lot of verbs. But other than that, I think it's very important study. But why is it important? Why do I say it's important? It's important because it's about the transformation of a liberation movement into a group, very close group that is totally focused on power, right? So from liberation and from the elements of social justice and emancipation that come with that discourse of liberation, we have this kind of demise into a group that's basically fixed on power. It's power seeking group that makes, as Marcela said, all sorts of pragmatist compromises and so on and so forth. So I was always thinking about why did that happen? The 1970s was dominated by two guerrilla groups, right? One was Fadayan and the other one was Mujahideen. And on Fadayan, I wrote a book, and that didn't happen to the Fadayan. And instead, what happened to the Fadayan was almost innumerable splits, and which at the time when we were going through all that history and living that history, it was something really bad, something to be avoided. But now I look back and I see that those splits actually show that a group cannot hold its diverse constituents. And if a group, self-declared emancipatory group, wants to control its diverse constituents, people who come from rural background, urban background, some are educated, some are not educated, men, women, people with different tendencies, even within the Fadayan, they didn't understand Marxism as a Marxist group. They didn't understand Marxism the same way. Some of the members of the Fadayan had understood Marxism in terms of social democracy. Some were, rigid Maoists, so the group held them together. So I was thinking about what happened to the Mujahideen, that they started denying that diversity, right? And that diversity and denial of that diversity in 1976 led to the 1975 led to the split, the Marxist split, that Marxist coup, so to speak. So that the idea of monopolization of the organization was born. And then you see that when with the demise of the Marxist Mujahideen and their transformation into PACAR organization, which, by the way, totally rejected armed struggle and was totally repressed by 1983. That idea, the rebirth of Mujahideen after the demise of Marxist Mujahideen, the rebirth of Muslim Mujahideen actually came with that package of repressing your internal diversity. So I think there's a great lesson for us here about democratic participation, that even revolutionary movements need to maintain that democratic participation, need to acknowledge that humans are a diverse bunch, and you cannot repress human diversity. Therefore, you cannot repress diversity of ideas within the same objective, within the same group, within the same organization, right? And the contemporary example of how wonderfully this can be put into practice is in Rojava, in the democratic confederalism of Rojava, and how they keep all sorts of diverse groups and all kinds of ideological tendencies and all sorts of movements together by virtue of democratic participation, and still running a sort of emancipatory liberationist group, right? So this is one of the greatest things that we can learn about the rise and demise of the People's Mujahideen. And it's a very sad story, and it's a very sad story because it was the most popular group outside of the state orbit after the revolution, until 1981 or so. So we are thinking not about a small fringe group, right? A small, kind of group of, activists. It was really a popular movement that was, gradually diminished into something entirely different. And I think the problem for that is to be fixated on power, on gaining political power at every and all cost, right? I like the term Islamic Marxists. Not that it's accurate or whatever, but it's really, there's a resonance to it. And as you know, this story, the term itself was created by Savak, by Iranian intelligence, when they raided one of the bases of Mustafa Shoayan, because Shoayan was this frontal thinker. He wanted to unify Fadayan and Mujahideen, Marxists and Muslims, and work as one group, right? So he owed his frontal thinking, by the way, to Dr. Mossadegh. And so when Savak raids their home, their secret home, they find both literature of Muslim Mujahideen and literature of Marxists. So the next title on the newspaper is that the Islamic Marxists, and somehow it's a fairly not accurate, but fascinating term. That's what I like to say. It's a fascinating term. But there's some kind of a truism in that term, in the sense that if you look at today's neo-Shariatis, or neo-Shariatis, I think that's what they want to be called, there is an element of social justice very similar to what Marxists of the 20th century have promoted, right? So it's not like, Islam is an entirely, the kind of essentialist argument that Islam is an entirely, different religion incapable of, accommodating these ideas. On the contrary, it's actually, there is a strong element of social justice within Islam. The way it works depends on the articulation that is given socially and politically, right? And that again is a lesson of what you offer in your book of Mujahideen, that you cannot drive away from that objective and seek social justice, whatever you mean it now, through power. Social justice is something, power is something. Power is important. I'm not saying that political power is not important. What I'm saying is that things are not reducible to power. And in order to have social justice, you need greater wisdom, right? What I especially was looking into was the Mujahideen's relationship with the Palestinian resistance and so on, and which is probably one of the most fascinating aspects of their activity in the 1970s. Their contact, the contribution of Palestinian to Mujahideen, and in terms of money, weapons, whatever, training, and so on and so forth. It's really interesting to see how movements find each other, right? So how there is a family resemblance, if you like, between movements. So I stop here, but I want to say that I'm very excited about this book, and I think it's a major contribution to this era. This is a really important era, and I think this is going to be a wonderful addition. So congratulations again, my dear friend Moisés.
Thank you, Professor Peyman. Thank you very much for your words that give us to a port to how complex are the politics in Iran, and how many things we must learn to understand that country, his history and his politics as well. Now the next speaker of this evening is our dear Professor Jaime Isla Lope. Let me introduce you, Professor. Jaime Isla Lopez is full-time professor in the Center of International Relations of the Faculty of Political and Social Sciences at UNAM. He received his PhD in political science with an orientation in international relations from the National Autonomous University in Mexico, and completed a master's in Middle East Studies in the American University of Beirut. He was member of the Mexican Foreign Service, attached to the Embassy of Mexico in Poland. Among his publications, we have the World Order Influence in the Middle East in 2019, just last year it was published, and a theory proposal for conflict studies in the Middle East. And this book was published this year, both by the National Autonomous University of Mexico Press. Welcome, Professor Jaime. Please go ahead.
Hello. Hello to everybody again. I really love to be with you, and I hope soon we could get together. First of all, let me say some words about the author, my dear author of this book. Since my dear friend Moisés Garduño joined our faculty at UNAM as a professor and researcher 6 or 7 years ago, I don't remember very well, we since then could consolidate with other professors a small but a great team that in a few years has produced a great amount of materials among books, small teaching books, reviews, articles that at this moment are used as reference for many of our undergraduate and graduate students about the Middle East. This not only in Mexico, but in many Spanish-speaking countries. Not only to say, also, this group has organized a great number of events at national and international level during these 6 or 7 years, and many of you have been invited to these events. For all this, I want to deeply thank in this occasion Moisés. Undoubtedly, he has been a profound dynamic force, and in many ways the soul of this activity we have had in our faculty. Thank you very much, Moisés, and this is the right time to congratulate you. More specifically, let me say this book about los combatientes del Pueblo de Irán, or the Mujahideen Halk, as it is written by Professor Garduño. After read it, I immediately take in account that it's a very important book, not only for Mexico, but for the whole Spanish-speaking world, especially, of course, for all those young people that wish to study the Iranian reality. I can tell you that at this moment, I don't know a book in Spanish concerned with Iranian politics with the details and profound knowledge offered in this one by Garduño. At the same time, I can assure you this is not how to say it, this is not a journalistic or a fashion book. No, this is a book for many years, mainly due to its deep historical roots and its well accomplished projection to our days throughout the whole story of the book. No, the book, I think the book is important also for the great diversity of sources it contains in different languages, English, French, Spanish, and of course Farsi and Arabic. No, but not only that, the interviews included in the book with very relevant actors from the events at that time give it an extra bonus, an extra value. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what the book tells. I want our audience to read it. Nevertheless, something attractive on reading the book is that you are finding through the reading that Mujahideen are not very different of many other political groups around the world. Contradictions, constant swerves, hypocrisy, lack of coherence, including violence, no? All these with the main purpose of survive and prevail despite everything, no matter what, no matter how, no? But always with a great capacity and skills to create new links, supports, and friends at all levels, especially at the international level at this time. To end, these people and groups like the Mujahideen seem in some way, when I was reading the book, I thought look like inspired by the famous politician of the French Revolution, Joseph Fouché. No? He was a celebrity who always has the clever, the actedness, the astucia, no? The actedness to survive, no? And prevail independently of who was in power, of who was in charge. No? As Fouché, most of the time, he was in the right side at the right moment. No? And I will stop this here and will give some more comments later. Please, I ask you please to read the book. Thank you very much, Alejandra.
Thank you, Dr. Jaime. We will read the book for sure. We are reading the book, actually. Thank you very much. Well, now is the turn to Moisés to give us more details about how he wrote this book, how many years it took for him to do this research, how many countries he visited to complete this research. Before presenting you, Musa, I will just share with you all the congratulations and good opinions of this event that we have in the chat. Danny Woolbury, Amir Garcia, Astrid, Uriel Gallardo, Rafi Reyes, Yana Martinez, all of them send congratulations to all of you. Well, let me introduce Dr. Garduño. Moisés Garduño Garcia is full-time professor in the Center of International Relations of the Faculty of Political and Social Sciences at UNAM. He received his PhD in Contemporary Arabic and Islamic Studies at the Autonomous University of Madrid and completed his postdoctoral studies at Center of Research and Higher Studies in Social Anthropology, Ciencias, in Mexico. He was chief of Asian Languages Department of the Center of Foreign Languages at UNAM. And in 2018, he was distinguished with the UNAM Teaching Award of Young Scholars for his contributions to the Middle East Studies and Social Sciences at UNAM. Among his books, we have Power and Resistance in the Arab Revolutions, published by Ciencias House, and Thinking Palestine from the Global South, and The Conflict Between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, published by UNAM. So please, Musa, go ahead, and I join all these people for the congratulations of this book.
Thank you very much, very dear Ale. And the first thing I want to say is I hope that all of you are well and healthy, because this is a sensitive context. It's a very difficult context. I never imagined have the opportunity to present one book about Mujahideen in the middle of a pandemic from Mexico City with my friends, but without the possibility to give you a kiss in person, you know? I never imagined that. So to me, it's the most important the most important issue, the most valuable thing that I have in my heart is your presence and your friendship, dear friends and colleagues. You don't know how happy I am again for this presentation and for let me share with you this celebration and this book. And you don't know how excited I am because I can see you even by Zoom, doesn't matter. But the fact that see you, that watch you in my computer makes me feel lucky and privileged because we have the chance to keep working in this magnificent vocation, which is the academy and the research, teaching, and this is something that is a privilege in this context. So I hope you are well and healthy. Of course, we like the mezcal, we like tacos, we like all of this warm environment that just bodies and souls together in one specific place and time produce. However, I hope we can be closer very soon again, dear friends. So the first thing I want to say is just express my gratitude to many people who were part of this research. Please forgive me if I don't mention to everyone because there were many people in the process. But I have to mention people like Ana Planet, Luis Mesa del Monte, who is watching us from the heaven. You know him, one of the most important people in Middle East studies in Mexico and Latin America. People like Luciano Sacara, Ustaz Servan Abrahamian. Even when he didn't want to take a picture with me during the interviews I conducted in New York, he told me that he didn't want to take a picture with me. Anyway, he has done, as you know, magnificent work on Mujahideen, and not only Mujahideen, but also in Iranian history. And I have to say thanks to him because he supported my job. Miguel Hernando de la Ramendi, Angelica Cuellar, whose support was very important for the publication of this book, just similar to Alicia Giron, the chief of the Asian Africa Studies program of UNAM, and many people, Walid Saleh, Luz Gómez, and many other colleagues who I really thankful with them. Of course, my gratitude to my students because they are my feet and my hope for future Middle East studies in Latin America. So I have to mention Marlene, Ceci, Eddie, Janet, Valeria, Lorena, Maritza, Dani, who is sending regards, Sared, Marichel, many of my students. And the most important is something I have to say because this book is dedicated to my wife, Ceci, because she has with me for many years before my PhD and from the master degree, I think. I don't remember because ups and downs, you know, all of these issues in the marriage, but this book is dedicated to her, and I want to share this celebration with her. It's in the other room because she's working. You know, Ustaz Dabashi, busy woman all the time. So she's working right now in the other side of the room. And one important thing I have to say is that this book is done with all my respect for Iranian people. I think that at the end of the day, Iranian people is the most important actor in this game. The Iranian people are the real hero after all of these years of tensions between Islamic Republic ruling elite and its enemies inside and abroad, because many people have died and others are in prisons, you know, like Nasrin Sotoudeh, for example, who has a sentence of 38 years and 148 lashes just for denouncing violations to human rights. People like Amir Salar Davoudi, for example, he's another lawyer who has been accused of similar charges. I mean, in this book, I tried to be very sensitive with the topic we are talking about and try to show that tensions between Islamic Republic and its enemies have produced a space in between full of social and popular movements with high participation of women, and now with many other expressions of social protest in what Asif Vayal calls, for example, street politics, you know, the micro revolutions of the unemployed people, the poor people mobilizations, and so forth, so on, and so forth. So this space in between is full of movements who are cracking little by little, I think, the authoritarian politics in Iran. And of course, we know that we have many challenges to transform Iran and to transform other countries. My country itself, Mexico, we have many challenges, of course, here. But I think it's interesting to know how these new generations are learning from history to realize what they don't want to be when they are in the streets. So, in other words, I think the history of Mujahideen is at the same time the best example of how social movements can learn what not to do when they are in the streets. The best example of how to realize what to do and what not to do in the struggle for social justice in the country, because as just Payman was saying, power is not everything. Social justice is have a destiny who can be not the state, of take the power of the state. Dabashi has wrote many lines about the state and the divorce between state and nation. And I quoted in the preface that he wrote, one of the biggest mistakes the Mujahideen committed after the Iranian Revolution was leave Iran for Iraq and receive economic and military support from Saddam Hussein, and then try to survive with any actor who openly calls itself anti-Islamic Republic establishment. So, in other words, that I tried to put in the book, they replaced Taleghani, Shariati, Bazargan, Montaseri for other intellectuals like Saddam Hussein, John Bolton, Turki Al-Faisal, Rudolph Giuliani, these kind of brilliant intellectuals, you know, that all of you know very well. But just as Payman has said, it's a sad story. It's a sad story. In the book, I tried to expose how these kind of groups use and abuse the moral market of ideas for social justice. For example, I tried to explain how conservative actors, factual powers, appropriate the significant and the meanings of social causes, how they resignify it, and how they take it for their own interest. For example, I think in the very same way in which Zionism takes democracy to colonize Palestine, I put in the book just when Mariam Rajavi tortured her own social base to speak about torture in Iran. So, of course, in the book, this is not an apology of Islamic Republic. No. When I wrote the book, I tried to be very critical with when we speak of torture inside the country. Even I quoted the book of Abrahamian Torture Confessions, which is a huge documentation about the phenomenon of torture in Iran. But in fact, I discovered something interesting in the making of this issue in the book. When I was with people of the regime in Tehran, they believed that I was come from Mujahideen. And when I was conducting interviews with Mujahideen in Washington, they believed that I was coming from the Islamic Republic regime. So I discovered something interesting in this phenomenon, that there was something similar in the structure of security in both actors, because I think they created these strategies of intelligence, surveillance, espionage, military tactics, fighting each other during the 80s. So now they know how they work each other very well. They know each other very well. because they were like two brothers fighting each other to win the love of one mother. In one sense, I call the revolution of 1979 as the mother of revolutions, in which they tried to show to the Iranian audience who was the real hero in that revolution, who was the real hero to fight against Pahlavi monarchy, who led the struggle against Imperial Guard, against Savak, and of course, who deserves to rule Iran. And this is paradoxical because all of these actors are still fighting for the very same cause in the Iranian public sphere, when at the same time they are losing their legitimacy in the Iranian public sphere with the Iranian people, you know. So now, of course, we have to say that they use each other for political survival. The Islamic Republic uses Rajavi to contain people like Mousavi, for example. Mariam Rajavi attacks Iran to look for sponsors in the Washington, Israeli, Saudi Arabia, and some European countries, anti-Islamic Republic lobbies. I wanted, for example, to show this picture. You know, this is one of the posters that we have in streets like Tehran, you know, when it's Rajavi and Mousavi in the same posters, the green color in Mariam Rajavi with the green color of the Green Movement. So this kind of, you know, confusion in narrative in the public sphere to try to confuse Iranian people about what are or what are not Mujahideen. So at the end, I think no matter how insignificant the Mujahideen may appear in the transnational public sphere, I think to Iran, this group will always be considered as a potential threat to its interests. Of course, not as an Islamo-Marxist movement, but as a group of mercenaries, you know, looking for these kind of sponsors. Because at the end, we have to remember they help to produce this narrative of human rights, democracy, and regime change in Iran. They helped, for example, to discover the nuclear program in the country in 2002. They helped to produce assassinations against nuclear scientists in Iran from 2007 up to now. In the case of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, perhaps with Soleimani, we don't know. This is according to some intelligence reports. But at the end, it's something that's, as long as geopolitical tensions persist in Iran and its enemies, Mujahideen Khalq will be there, no longer, as I mentioned before, as an Islamo-Marxist organization, but as an organization of mercenaries who want to play the role, I think, that Ahmed Chalabi's played in Iraq during the National Council of Resistance in that time, almost 20 years ago, but they tried to play in Iran. So I hope, my friends, that this book has a positive reception in Spanish readers. I remember I request from Dabashi one opinion about write this book in English or in Spanish, and he told me do it in Spanish because I want to produce, you know, inspirations in my students, just like you have inspired me. I still remember that conference, Ustaz Dabashi, in London during the PhD conference in SOAS, when I was listening the keynote that Dabashi was speaking about the Arab Spring in that time. So all of these memories are inspirations. And that's why I decided to do it in Spanish in order to produce more interest in my students, in our important audience. And why not to try to say that people from Mexico, from Latin America can also write about Iran, and not only people with last names of Richardson, Spencer, Esposito, you know, these kind of last names. People in Latin America and Mexico can write and can produce knowledge about Middle East, because we have the right to think, we have the right to share, and we have the right to feedback each other when we are trying to do research. So in the book, as Alejandra mentioned, we have many interesting archives. For example, the declassified archives in Ajax operation. That's why, for example, why the book starts with the 1953 environment in Iran. We have primary sources like Chewone Quran Museum, for example, Mujahid Journal written by Mujahideen, some biographies and memories like the memory of Masoud Rajavi, memories of Rafsanjani, some Kurdish sources. So this is more or less that I tried to share with you. Interviews with Rita Parsi, my interview with Abul Hassan Bani Sadr in Paris, you know, telling me that he was the real representation of democracy for Iran, and Iran lost his opportunity because he was not part of that process of transition. You know, all of these elements are in the book, and I hope that can be useful and interesting for you, for my students, for my colleagues. I hope that after some months, after we can organize another presentations and receive more and more feedbacks just like this evening. And thank you very much. خیلی ممنون حمید. مرسی پیمان. متشکرم دوستان من. امیدوارم ببینیم خیلی زود اینجا در شهر مکزیک ولی بدون پاندمی. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Musa. Thank you very much. We have more comments in the chat. Norma Ortega, Janet Mendoza, Juan Carlos Castillo, all of them sending congratulations for your book. And there is a general question for the panel about the Biden's talk. How will this affect the relations between Iran and United States? If you want to answer this or comment something else about the book, please go ahead. And Musa, please tell us where we can get this book, if it's going to be an ebook, or is there any printed edition? Please give us some information, because people is also asking about that.
Oh, thank you, Ale. This is one of the most important things that I forgot. The book is going to be available during the 2 first weeks of January, because now, not only because pandemics, but because next week UNAM enters in holidays, and we are not yet working in the university. In fact, we are working from home, and next term will be just the same like this one. I mean, from home via internet. And the library of the Asian and African Studies program of UNAM will be open just specific days. And I will share in the Facebook page one email to write to the program to make some appointments to get the book. So this is in the time that UNAM sends the book to libraries in the first or 2 months of the next year. So we have to be patient, and this is going to be the only way to get the book. But in the time, I think we are going to organize more presentations, and well, let me see if I can open the book via ebook just 1 or 2 months in the time that you can get it in person.
Okay, will be fine. So if you have some comments about the books, something that has been left, please go ahead. Everyone who wants to use place the microphone, go ahead.
Ale, may I say something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, just a few scattered comments. The significance of Moisés' book is the fact that, as Marcela Álvarez was actually saying, is the really glorious beginning of Mujahideen Khalq at a very important revolutionary moment. And I have known any number of rank and file members of Mujahideen Khalq. They have been my students. So I know the idealism, the hope, the aspirations of an entire generation of Iranians who joined revolutionary organizations like Mujahideen Khalq. It is very important for us to remember that the current corrupt and reactionary and treacherous disposition and character of Mujahideen Khalq will never diminish the idealism, the heroism of an earlier generation of younger members of the Mujahideen Khalq. The other thing is the slaughter of the members of Mujahideen Khalq in the prisons in the 1980s of Islamic Republic, that again many young revolutionary idealists who had joined Mujahideen Khalq were killed in the prisons of Islamic Republic. As a result, our critical position, necessary critical position today vis-a-vis Mujahideen should not eliminate this early history of this extraordinary revolutionary organization. The other thing I wanted to say, when I was talking to, when my dear friend Wahbzadeh was talking about the paradox between being Marxist Islam, Islamic Marxism, I was looking at him. Both Wahbzadeh and I come from Muslim families, and we are both Marxists. So there is no contradiction. It's perfectly legitimate. Peymanzadeh and I are the nightmares of Andrzej Breivik. We are Muslims and we are Marxists. Now, if you want to put them together, that's a different story. But ultimately, as I was looking at the picture of Moisés on my screen, he still has all his beautiful hair and his beard is black. He's young. He still has a lot to do. But I hope his next book is not about this politics and Saudi Arabia and Terita Parsi said this and the thing. I would like you to actually write a book on Iranian cinema, on Persian cuisine, on underground music. You know all of this. There is a wealth of things about contemporary Iran that you do. And enough. You have done a good chunk of your life on Mujahideen. That's enough. Moving on to something more pleasant. At the same time, I believe and trust and hope next time I come to Mexico, Ale is the head of the Museum of Anthropology and has her entire section onto herself. So by which time Jaime and I and Peyman, we will have retired, and the three of us go for a hiking on the top of the, there was a sun and a moon, and so we go on the side of the, but I also want to reiterate the significance of my other dear friend who is not here, Moisés' wife, Cersei, who has been, I know her, I love her, I deeply admire her. Her partnership with Moisés has been instrumental in Moisés' scholarship. They're all like members of my family, Ali and Moisés, and also their extended friends and family. It is a bizarre time. As to the question of Biden, what will happen with Biden, it really right now, as you know, we live in a bizarre situation that this Trump has not even yielded. We don't know. For all I know, he may actually come back and be the next, Mussolini of United States, for all we know. And even if Biden comes, that doesn't mean God's gift to humanity. Who is he? So I hope the key issue is the ungodly sanctions that are imposed upon 85 million human beings in Iran in need of food, in need of medicine. Today I read horrible news that in fact the United States is putting pressure, preventing the distribution of COVID vaccine going to Iran. I mean, these are criminal thugs who are in charge of this country. They have no humanity, they have no sense, and they're rushing to enable Israel and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates to put them in a position of assassinations and so forth, which I really don't care. What we do care about is the fate of 85 million human beings who are entrapped in this condition between these state rivalries. And as a result, it is crucial to keep the paramount on our mind, not these political organizations, but the actual people who are at the mercy of their machinations. That's all. Thank you, Ale.
Thank you, Professor Dabashi. I agree with you that we must research on culture, art, history, something that make us connect, no, with the core of the culture. But of course, international relations are important as well. But we encourage Musa to move. Please, Dr. Payman.
Yes. So thanks, Musa, for your reflections, and everyone else for your presentations, and it's wonderful. I just wanted to say that when I think about it, and in light of your comments and Professor Dabashi's comments, and of course we are here in the shadows of Professor Dabashi, who has taught us so much, and has taken how can I say this? It's probably not the right word, but intellectual history to another level, a multi-dimensional level, because kind of not before really, but works outside of Professor Dabashi's works, to me at least, were a lot of linearity, but he brought this complexity to intellectualism, to arts, to cinema, and all those complications are really what fascinates us about who we are, right? And one of the things about, in light of the comments that I heard here, is that one of the things that I really miss about that age and the transformation of Mujahideen is that loss of intellectual history. So if you look at the 1970s, 1967, a number of very enthusiastic young intellectuals, intelligentsia, who were trying to carve something new out of their condition and write literature about it, and write treatises and analyses. And now we ended up with this sort of cultish group who that locks up their members in their complexes and bases and so on and so forth, and without any sort of expression, cultural, social expression, other than kind of being fixated on power and making all sorts of deals. So that's kind of the really saddest part. I said this is a sad history, but probably the saddest part is that you don't get any more production of ideas by people who want to change things, right? I'm not into international relations, so I really can't answer the Biden question. And really, like Professor Dabashi said, really, who cares, right? Policy is important. Policy is important. I have my doubts about, America radically shifting from one policy to another, and so on and so forth. But what I wanted to say this, that from what I hear and from what I see, is that the other side of this story, which is the Iranian state, is actually exploiting the sanctions in order to being under sanction in order to exploit the situation to their benefit, right? And this whole manipulation of currency value that is basically done by the state to finance their operations or the stock market, recently, is really that. So it's not, yes, I agree totally that 85 million people should not be under sanctions, but this sanction has also a really great excuse for the state to exploit their own people so that they can stay on power. In light of the last year's uprising, the Navadahash, right? The November 2019 uprising in Iran, in 70% of the provinces of the cities, we had this kind of popular uprising of the poor, and in light of that, so my point is that it's really very complicated, with Biden and sanctions and so on and so forth. But, I have lost all my faith in all kinds of, looking for the next policy or whatever. Just, anyways, sorry, I leave on that very, pessimistic note. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. You are not pessimistic, it's realistic. Dr. Jaime, Marce, please, go ahead.
I would just like to say something that I constantly remind my students. We should not have excessive hope on United States presidents, because they are not omnipotent. They are part of a political system that has been structured over the past 400 years. And it doesn't really matter if he's a Democrat or a Republican when it comes in policy, because the thing that changes is the rhetoric. The Republicans, at least, are more honest in this sense, because they always, we should remember that it was precisely during Obama's presidency when we had more interventions in the modern history of the Middle East. So we have an upcoming election in Iran next year. And this is really important, because this is also going to affect the United States-Iran relation. It's not just who sits on the throne in the United States. It's going to happen now that Rouhani has had his second term, and we will have another change in. So it's speculate on what's really going to happen. I think we need relationship they are going to build.
What the United States is doing, right? There are two actors in this relation. Please, Jaime, go ahead.
Just a few comments about the term islamo-marxismo. No, I remember during the 60s and 70s we used to apply the term Marxista Guadalupano, no, Guadalupean Marxist for the Guadalupe Virgin, no. When we refer to some members of the Communist Party in Mexico, no, that they did this connection between dialectic Marxism, dialectic materialism, and revelation. No? So for me, it came to my mind immediately when I read this Islamo-Marxist. I say, oh, like the Guadalupean Marxist of the 70s in Mexico. No? And on the other way, I can't stop thinking on the imminent elections we'll have in Mexico next year, where as the Mujahideen, the two historical parties, enemies all the time, now they are going to join together. They are going to run the election together in a coalition, with the same objective of the Mujahideen, to survive. So that's why I said that the Mujahideen, there were groups like this all around the world. And also I wanted to mention as Hamid and Payman that I also missed UNAM, because it has passed 10 months since we haven't gone to our offices, our faculty, and we are very close, but the UNAM is closed right now. No, that's all, and I wanted to say, send my best regards for all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Isla. Yes, we miss each other, all of us. Hopefully next year we will join again. Mustafa, congratulations from Tajere Gasemi as well. And we have no more comments, but if you want to add something else, we have a little time. Musa, something else, please?
Yeah, just to say that my next work will be one book that I will call Dabashism, because in terms of Payman has shared with us, Dabashi has thought many elements, has produced many important inspirations, not only books and articles, but inspirations. I remember Ustaz Dabashi, our very dear friend and colleague, Ali Fatullah Nejad, for example. I have seen how you have support not only him, but also many people like him, like us. You are very, very generous. And of course, is a kind of important acknowledgements for you, and the reception of your ideas in Mexico has been very important for us. You know, Ustaz, and just like Peyman, you are more than welcome in Mexico. I really hope that in the next months, maybe next year, we can organize something similar to this, but in person in Mexico City, sharing with our friends and colleagues in UNAM, and sharing that this period of the time, that this moment just was a nightmare, just a bad dream to speak about in the future, because you don't know, we miss many things in the as ordinary people, not as a scholar, not as a professor, but as ordinary human being. I miss kiss people, sending hugs. I mean, this is something that I need, and of course, I hope that very much in the next year we can again be close and together, Ustaz. And thank you very much for being here, for spending this time in this beautiful celebration. Thank you for your friendship and for your scholarship, and for all of you have produced in terms of human sentiments, in terms of friends. Thank you very much, Ustaz.
Thank you. I was delighted. Let me see. Yeah, I was delighted to have been part of the conversation. Next time we come, we kidnap Ale and take her to Huaca, and she will teach us how to make mezcal. That will be the beginning of wisdom. Without mezcal, all is conversation. Thank you for including me. Lovely to see you all, and looking forward to seeing you in person. Please stay safe. Please stay healthy. And Moises, please give my love to Cersei as well. And looking forward to seeing all of you, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We will hope we need news for this book, Musa, for the published one or the ebook. Please let us know, and take care, and Khodafez to all of you.